Welcome to The Soul Truth with Pauline Montemayor, the podcast where we dive deep into the worlds of healing and the truths about spirituality, mental health, and the soul. This podcast is for the real ones, the ones who have the courage to dig deep, the ones who are longing to heal and willing to do the work, and the ones who are ready to embrace and fully stand in their own truth and get to know who they truly are deep within the soul. I'm your host, Pauline, here to guide you towards your own soul truth and cultivating a life of authenticity and alignment. So let's get into it. Welcome to The Soul Truth with Pauline Montemayor. On previous episodes, I've talked about how there's a lot of misconceptions about psychic mediums and the work that we do. And a lot of people often think that they are evil or it's made up and it's not real. But my special guest and I are going to prove all of you skeptics wrong today. I'm very happy and excited to have my friend and special guest on, Iris Salita. Iris is a spiritual life coach, yoga teacher, and psychic medium who is dedicated to demystifying spirituality, holistic healing, and spiritual gifts. Wanting to make these topics accessible and available for marginalized communities, Iris created her small business, Laya Kalalua, which means free soul in Tagalog, in April 2023, to provide offerings and workshops for her community. Her work has uplifted many and continues to inspire and educate others amidst the turbulence in the world. So welcome, Iris.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Iris and I actually met in a very interesting way. We were in an online workshop that was being sponsored by another Filipino oriented social media page. And we connected in the chat during the actual workshop and realized that we both did very similar spiritual work. So we connected outside of that on Instagram and we chatted a little bit there. And I actually booked Iris for a reading a couple months ago. And it was such an amazing experience. It was a wonderful reading. It was very validating. Iris is absolutely connected and gifted. I can affirm that. And ever since then, we became friends and we've been sharing and learning a lot from each other. We realized we come from a very similar background and had a similar path. So it's been really awesome connecting with you and meeting you in this work. So I know we've talked about our journey a bit, but I'd love if you could share with the audience about how you came into your own spiritual work and practice. Because as we know, it's definitely a journey to get there.
Yes, definitely a journey. For me, my spiritual journey, I think, started honestly since I was young. I've always felt connected to nature. I also grew up Catholic, so my introduction to spirituality and a relationship to a higher power started through religion. I joined this Filipino community that's rooted in Catholicism when I was in high school. So for me, that was kind of the door that opened a lot of things because I grew up in Maryland on the East Coast. There were only like 4 of us Filipinos in my high school. And so having that little amount of people to relate to and connect to with my cultural identity, I felt like I was always kind of searching and trying to find that sense of belonging. So joining that Filipino community actually helped me to connect to my culture, helped me to grow my confidence, and ultimately connected me to spirituality under the umbrella of religion. And so I stayed in that community for about 5 years, became a leader, and when I was in college, that's when I chose to divert my path and kind of hone in on my real interest and my real connection to spirituality outside of an organized religion. And so that's where I started to dive into yoga, meditation, wellness, Buddhism. And I've been on that journey, I would say, ever since. For my spiritual gifts and my spiritual path, I would say, so from 2017 to 2020, that's when I kind of went on my own journey that I just mentioned. When the pandemic started in 2020, that's when I started to notice okay, I'm sensing spirits in my room
Mhm.
now. I can't fall asleep. I have to watch something to distract myself to fall asleep. And I had a lot of fear because, like I said, growing up in religion and then having these experiences, I was like, what's wrong with me? Did something snap and I'm going
Mhm.
crazy? So it was a very fear based introduction to spiritual gifts. And at the time, I didn't know anyone I could talk to about this. I just felt like I was going through it alone. And I booked my first reading, I believe, the next year in 2021. And even then, I was still
Mhm.
afraid. So, my first reading ever was like an Akashic Records reading. So, yeah, they connect to your future timelines, your past lives, all of those things. And I found out I have many past lives where I've been a healer, I've been a shaman. So I've been doing this for a
Mhm.
while. And something stood out from my conversation with, she's actually a Filipina witch and Akashic Records reader. But one thing that stood out from that first reading was the word Babaylan. And when I heard it, I was like, oh, there's something really like, there's a really big pull to that word for me. And I didn't know what it was. The only thing I've heard about Babaylans was in 2020, I kept seeing this like mystical mountain in the Philippines. And I asked my mom, what mountain is this? Like, what do I keep seeing? And she told me it was Mount Banahaw, and that's where a lot of people do like a pilgrimage, or like they'll go up the mountain. It's a very sacred mountain, and apparently Babaylans have lived on that
Mm.
mountain. And that's where I've heard that word. So when it came up in that reading, I was like, okay, we're onto something. There's something here, and I need to keep like finding it. So learning about the Babaylans, who are kind of like shamanic priestesses, or how would you describe
I would say the
them?
same, like the like shamanic, like shamans, basically. I would say, yeah.
Shamans. Yes. Yeah, they're healers, they're shamans in the Philippines. And that really fascinated me. Not to consider myself as one, but just the idea of it, that these are present in our culture too. So eventually I ended up in a mentorship with a medium. This was 2023. That really helped me to understand what was happening to me and to remove the fear around it. I remember even being nervous to sign up for it because I was like, I didn't have this gift since I was a kid, since I was born. It's just like really developing and getting stronger now.
Mhm.
So I didn't know if I should be in that cohort, but I ended up doing it and saw that my gifts were real, saw that they were pretty accurate too. And the rest is history. I started my small business after
Yeah.
that.
It's so interesting because we really have such a similar background. Like I was also like in
Yeah.
a Filipino, like Catholic community for a very long time. And I think for both of us, it's like organized religion. And in our case, Catholicism was really like the door that got us in, but then it expanded beyond that afterwards. So, and I had very similar sentiments too. Like when I started, feeling spirit and seeing spirit in my room, I was like freaking out. And it was during the pandemic as well, it was the same timeline. And I also did a mentorship for a year, in 2023. And that's
Oh.
crazy that we're like aligning that way. But, I think development is so important for anyone who's spiritually gifted because a lot of people are naturally gifted, but we do need other people to, it's really beneficial, I think, to have mentors and teachers that can guide us like in our development and helping us to really learn how to like utilize and like hone in on our gifts and grow them so that we can really help other people with them.
I agree. I feel like it was such a game changer for
Mm-hmm.
me. And if I didn't have a mentor, I think I would still have a lot of fear around what was happening. So it really helped to dispel that fear for me and trust myself that this is real and what I'm seeing isn't just my imagination.
What were some of the fears you had about it?
Oh, that's a great
Really, like
question.
same as mine.
Um, I guess some of the fears included not being sure if I was connecting to a malevolent or benevolent
Mm-hmm.
spirit. I couldn't really know for sure. Also, just maybe getting possessed if I connected, and what if I can't get rid of them or they try to take over my body? So things like that.
Yeah, I think it was same for me. Like the whole fear about like it being evil or connecting to like darker evil forces or spirits or something like spiritually harmful like happening. And I think that just goes back so much
Right.
to like Catholicism and just the teachings that are there about this work, about the spiritual realm, and not understanding it, in terms of what it really actually is. And as we
Hmm.
know that that also goes all the way back to colonization, right? And just like the messaging and the teachings that were enforced upon like our own ancestors as well. But I think it's cool because we learn, I think, through our own development that a lot of that stuff is not true. And that when we're connecting, it's not to darker, evil, scary things, that we really are connecting to a pure love and genuine source and a higher power or God, however you choose to connect or call. So, can you tell me a bit about? I know for me personally, right? Like a lot of what helped me to overcome my fear was learning more about our ancestors and learning more
Hmm.
about pre colonial spirituality in the Philippines and the spiritual gifts that our ancestors had and practiced and lived with prior to colonization. So, how was it for you in overcoming your fears as well?
Yes, very similar. I love the parallels in our journeys. I feel like when I started to develop a real deeper connection with my ancestors, it helped me to trust what was happening. The first couple readings that I got with different mediums, including actually the recent one that, when we did readings for
Mhm.
each other, my Lola, my grandma on my dad's side came through, I guess now in three different readings. But when I heard from her, I didn't have a relationship with her in the physical realm because she passed away shortly after I was
Mhm.
born. But in the spiritual realm, she's around me all the time. She's helping me to find my path. She gives me a lot of guidance, and she honestly like nudges me to keep learning, keep growing, and to read books, to learn from podcasts and YouTube videos. So connecting to her through those first readings helped me see how real this was. The mediums saw my grandma like cooking in a big pot for multiple kids. She actually had 9 kids. They saw her living in the Philippines and her lifestyle there. And so all of these different images that the mediums had confirmed what I knew about her. And so just having that proof
Mhm.
and having it done from different people who didn't know each
Right.
other is what showed me that this is real. There's no way they could have made this up. And so that helped me actually trust my connection to my ancestors too and continue to work with them.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a similar experience too. I had
Mhm.
different mediums who confirmed that my spiritual gifts came from my maternal lineage. And that's the side, my Lola, my grandmother on that side, is the one who's from the indigenous tribe in the Philippines. So, like, to your point, too, it's like I had people who are not connected to each other that don't know my family history or know anything about my life that said, gave me the same confirming information that, this is who my grandmother is, this is where the gifts are coming from, this is the lineage that it's coming out of. So it was so like validating and like you said, like confirming and even I
Mhm.
think even comforting, right? To know like, okay, yeah, this is actually really real. Like this really exists in my family, it's in my bloodline, it's in my ancestral line. And I think that helped me to feel a lot more empowered in my work as well as a psychic medium.
Totally. Yeah. Comforting, I totally agree with. And even from the readings that I do, I can see how comforting it is for other people now. So it's just very full circle that those people that helped confirm this for us, we get to be those people for other people now.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. And it really is like I love doing readings for people it's not only fun, but I feel like it's such a gift because I feel like the things that come out in readings, we really cannot make this stuff up, guys. Like when we do readings, especially for me, when I'm reading for a complete stranger, like I know nothing. And it's incredible to see what information comes out from spirit and how validating and I think especially how healing it can be for the recipient, right? So for you, can you tell us more about what your experience has been like giving readings and how you got into your coaching business and doing what you're doing now?
Yes, for sure. So I actually started Lai Kalulua in April 2023, like my intro said. And honestly, I felt a little imposter syndrome getting started because I was fresh out of this mentorship and I did 20 practice readings to pass them and to pass the
Wow.
mentorship. I chose 10 people that I knew, but then I wanted to challenge myself and ask each person to find someone that I didn't
Mm.
know so I could read for them. And so I started to see, like, okay, I have pretty strong mediumship. Like, this is real. And so starting my business, I didn't expect anyone to really, book me for some reason, but it grew so organically. I met this mother and daughter duo in my neighborhood at the time. I was living in this townhouse in Maryland, and they booked a reading with me. I got to connect with some loved ones on the other side. And the mom actually asked me if I could mentor or teach mediumship to her daughter who was in high school. And I was like, what? Like, like you always feel a little bit of that imposter syndrome at first, but then I realized, okay, well, this is happening for a reason. And I can give her more than is probably needed. Like now, for example, I coach people once a week. Then we talk on WhatsApp. But at the time, I gave her daughter like 4 hours a week, and it was just because this was like, this was my time to practice. This was my time to really like also cultivate my skills as a coach. But that's how, yeah, the readings turned into coaching, and more people started to ask after like a one-time reading if they can work with me for like a longer container, like 3 months to 6 months. And now, yeah, I work with each client for 6 months, and it's incredible to see their
Hmm.
transformations.
That's amazing. And I love that they're like you're
Yeah.
able to help, develop them and bring them further. It's been cool for me too because interestingly enough, like some of my psychotherapy clients are also intuitives and some of them have mediumistic abilities and spiritual gifts or come from a lineage of that as well. And, in some of our therapeutic work, I've also been doing, I guess, to some level, like some spiritual coaching as well, and just helping them to develop more of their intuition and how to communicate a little bit more with spirit and to like dispel their fears as well and learn how to really start like leaning in and like tapping into their gifts, because I feel like, especially with everything that's happening in the world right now and even in this country, like we need people to be tapped in. Like we need people to really be out here like using their gifts that they were blessed with, right? And to help uplift not only themselves and their community, but just the collective, like as a whole.
We do need those people. And I will say it has been a game changer for me in terms of being able to navigate the type of climate we're in the US right now and all of the destruction. We're in the belly of the beast. So a lot of chaos is going to ensue in the crumbling of these systems that were built on white supremacy. And so, us being grounded in our spiritual practice and our spiritual truth almost like gives you a second set of armor, in my
Mm.
opinion. Like, I find that when I'm overwhelmed, when I am not feeling safe, when I'm feeling a little bit hopeless, like that's when I turn to my spiritual practices. I'll, do my yoga, my meditation, or I'll go out in nature and sit next to a tree or talk to the tree, talk to the
Mm-hmm.
crows, talk to the animals and tell them like, hey, the earth is crazy right now.
Help us
Like,
out, please.
yeah, help us. And that's where the gifts come in because, yeah, you do get messages. You do get confirmation that, even though the external reality sucks, like, they'll tell you, like, hey, you're on the right path. We're still really proud of you. You're going to keep going and just do what you can. You can't fix everything, but you can do what you
Right.
can.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of the things that you just mentioned are very similar ways that I connect as well. I think nature has been such an incredible source of confirmation, but also like almost like a portal, I feel like, to connect with the spirit world, with nature, with just like even like the guardians and ancestors of the land that we are on. I think a lot of people don't always think about the land remembers everything, and the land has its own energy, its own wisdom that we can still pull from even to this day. So I think that that connection to nature that we all have the ability to do and have, right, is like I think super important, especially like in doing the spiritual work that we do, but even just navigating, like you said, like the times that we're currently living in.
Yes. And I know there's all this talk about having elders and talking to your elders and being guided. But I think what sometimes people may fail to forget is that these trees are so old. Like, like they're also elders. There's different types of nature elders. Like you go on a mountain for a hike, the mountain's an elder too. And they've lived through catastrophes. They've lived through stuff like this. And so it's really nice to be able to hear from nature and connect with the guardians, like you say, because they have seen so much and like they're literally grounded. I mean, they're a part of the earth, so they'll just ground you back to the earth
Right.
too to help you remember your power.
Yes. And I think a lot too about like our own ancestors and how they were extremely connected to the land. Like when we look at like indigenous history in any culture, there was so much like reverence and honor and respect for the land and everything that the land like provide. And I like that because it also like a tangible way to connect with our ancestors as well. It's like, okay, we're still sharing in this like nature connection or like through the energy like of nature and the land that we both have. How do you connect with your ancestors? Like what are some ways or practices?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot when I'm doing readings. And so what I usually share with people is starting with creating an ancestral altar was such a game changer for me because it gave me a physical reminder of them and helped me, like, it's kind of like muscle memory or when you associate a location with a certain thing. Like, for example, if you have a meditation corner, every time your body sits in that corner, your body's like, okay, we're getting prepared to meditate
Mm-hmm.
now. So in the same way, it's like when I'm standing or sitting in front of my altar, I'm like, okay, this is our time to connect. This is our time to get guidance. And it feels very meditative. So sometimes I'll do writing, so I'll write letters to them. Other times I'll just speak out loud. I like to give them their favorite foods or fruits. And I like to clean my altar like every few months too. Sometimes I'll forget, life gets busy, but I do my best. Yeah. I'll give them like candles, crystals, herbs. So it really just depends. It's like a relationship. So it has grown a lot over the last couple of
Mm-hmm.
years. What about
Do you want to
you?
hear a really interesting story about my ancestral altar? So when
Yeah.
I first started seeing a curandera back in 2020, and she's of Mexican descent, and she had told me you need to make an altar for your ancestors. And at the time, I already had like my main altar, but she encouraged me to make a separate one that was just for them. So I did do that, right? I made like an altar, I put all these different things, like textiles from the Philippines are on it as like the cloth. And my offering for my ancestors, and to this day, has always been flowers. So I'm like getting the chills right now as I'm talking about this. The very first bouquet that I bought for my ancestors, I put it on the altar, and within like 1 or 2 days, the entire thing died. Like all the flowers
Whoa.
died, and I was like, what does this mean? I was like, kind of like, I was a little concerned. And then I went back and I asked my curandera, I was like, I put these flowers down and they died like right away. And she's like, yeah, like that's like all the energy that has been like absorbed, by your ancestors. And she's like, it's not like a bad reflection of you, but it's just reflective of what they also have like been through or like what they carry. But she's like, keep giving offerings to them and it will change. And sure enough, I followed her advice and I continued to give flowers. And ever since then, they have like bloomed beautifully. And I've even had like bouquets that I put down, like, for example, like roses that would like bloom so big and they would last for like 2 weeks, which is not really common for roses. So I usually can also kind of tell sometimes like where my ancestors are at or like what the energy is just based off of like the life of the flowers that I offer them. But yeah, that was my crazy first offering.
Wow.
Is the-
Oh my gosh.
but
That's crazy. And shout out to the curandera for knowing, what's going on with the flowers. Cause yeah, similar to me, I've also noticed like there's certain foods that my ancestors really like and they stay pristine for like weeks before they like grow mold. Or sometimes they don't even grow
wow.
mold, they just get kind of like hardened. So yeah.
Wow. And for anyone out here who might be listening and thinking that this is like some woo woo stuff, if you really think about it, in many cultures, people make offerings to their ancestors, right? And I think about it a lot. Like it's similar to when people go to a cemetery and they leave an offering of flowers or a favorite object or token of the person, of the loved one who passed. So this is a similar practice that we're doing for our ancestors, who may have even lived before our time, right, in our past generations as well. So this is not like a woo-woo ritual, guys. This is something that people have been doing forever.
If I can add to that, I'll also say I think to keep an open mind with these things, we have to remember like the context of the country that we live in, because in a lot of westernized countries, there's a lot of taboo around death and the afterlife.
Mhm.
And it's, everything here is so separated, right? So, like, we have doctors that specialize in so many different parts of the body. And when we look at Eastern traditions, including our ancestors, right? They see the body as like through energy too. There's like such a holistic
Mhm.
component and everything is unified. It's like one body. Everything like works together in keeping the health of things. And also there's a lot of religions, Eastern religions, that talk about the afterlife, that talk about death, and it's not as taboo. And death is a part of the culture. It's like embedded that there's this sacredness around it, and it removes some of that fear. So I think sometimes when I have conversations with people who are maybe a little bit more closed minded to this stuff, I just kind of like to bring in this perspective because that's where woo woo has become the language to surround anything that people are uncomfortable with. That's what it is. It's a discomfort and it's like I don't want to think about death. You're reminding me about death and I don't want to think about
Mm.
that. So,
That's
yeah.
an excellent point because I think that there is a lot of fear around death for many people, and it's looked upon as like this, like a heavy, obviously like sad part of life, which it is to a degree. But there's also, I think we know from a spiritual perspective that death is also something so different, right? It's like such a beautiful transformation, and it's the journey of the soul back to the other side, back to its original place. And I think when people can learn how to understand death through a spiritual lens, I think it helps a lot to learn how to become more comfortable and accepting of what death really means. And also more importantly, I think what it means for the soul. Because it's really just the death of the physical body. The soul doesn't die when we pass. And I think also like what you're saying, I think when it comes to the spiritual world and spiritual work, a lot of people just fear the unknown. I think a lot of people are just afraid of things they don't know about or not versed about or have not experienced. So I find a lot of people, again, like are skeptics about the work that you and I may do, or, think it's a sham or are scared to try it. And I even tell some of my friends, who are like weary about getting a reading, I'm like, why don't you just go to one and actually see for yourself what it's like? And you may come out and realize that it's not a bad or scary thing at all. Because I have a lot of people who are always afraid to get readings because they're so afraid that like they're going to hear something bad or they're going to get like bad news or like a bad like fortune or something. And I'm like, if the practitioner you're seeing has the right intentions and good ethics, that's usually not how the experience is going to be. So I don't know how it is for you and when you encounter that with other people, but what are your views on that also?
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't get a reading from just
Mhm.
anybody, but if it's someone that you trust and maybe you've gotten to know and you feel safe around that person, I think that that can be your green flag to see if, this is the right person to get a reading from. I will say your first reading, it's normal to be nervous and afraid because you've never had a reading before. I was also afraid. So I'm not even going to cap and say like I wasn't scared because I was. But yeah, just making sure that you build connection with people, and it doesn't even have to be like through communicating. It could be, looking through some of their posts or long format content like this where you can really hear and feel the energy of the person who you might get a reading from. I think that it can open a lot of doors too, because from what I've seen in my readings is sometimes they'll get messages about things they've already thought
Mhm.
about, things that their intuition has already
Yep.
told them, and sometimes they just needed to hear it from another person that, oh, like that was my lolo, my grandfather, or that was, like there's something about a reading that can just solidify your path for you and push you in that right direction. So I would say sometimes people are missing out, but also there's a timing, like a divine timing to things. So whenever you feel ready or you want to take that leap, is it's really up to you. You have free will.
Yeah, I think discernment is really important for sure because I think you and I both know, and many people in the spiritual industry know, like unfortunately, not everyone may be as legit or may have good ethics or intention in their practice. I think definitely like doing your due like diligence and your research is really important, and just even trusting your own intuition, as you're looking to book with someone, to see if this feels like the right person, the right match, the right energy for you. Because sometimes, we get signs and we get little nudges too that maybe this may not be the right person for you to see for a reading or the right person to work with. So I think that's like super important in that element of like when booking something, booking a service. So in your experience as a psychic medium and as a spiritual practitioner, what are some of the ways that you have been able to use and integrate your gifts to help others?
Ooh, I feel like it happens both in session and out of session. So in session, meaning through the readings that I provide, which can be like 30 minutes, like a mini reading, or a full reading, 60 minutes, where I do ancestral mediumship. I connect to people's ancestors and provide messages. There's also the 6 months of coaching where I really provide that direct guidance over a long period of time for people to integrate their spiritual gifts into their lives. I often meet people that started where I was, where they had fear around it, and maybe their parents are like, "Why are you getting into that stuff? It's
Mm-hmm.
evil." And it just feels like a part of you that might hide out of shame or feeling like criticized. And so we do a lot of deep work in that container as well. There's also the workshops that I teach. So, Intro to Mediumship, I started to teach that after going to the Philippines last March. It was the first time I'd been back since I was 6 years
Mm-hmm.
old. I used to live there as a kid. And so when I went back, it was just such a deep reclamation and like identity healing. So it was actually, I think in Shargao that I heard directly from my ancestors, like, hey, you need to teach this already. Because I had been getting ideas about, like, oh, maybe I'll teach a workshop one day. But this one, it was like pure downloads of, like, this is what you're going to talk about. And you don't have to teach new information. You can just teach the same workshop to different people because it's knowledge that is really needed at this time. And so yeah, as soon as I got back, actually a few months after, that's when I taught my first intro to mediumship. And doing that workshop has really shown me the power of spiritual spaces made by BIPOC for BIPOC. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. So there's something really special about having a room full of people who, their ancestors were waiting for that moment to connect with them because it's like the first hour is always information heavy and then we take a break and then the second half is just practice. So you literally get to connect with your own spirit guides, your own ancestors, and it's such a healing space to be in. People get to open up about, how colonial mentality has affected their families and they're the black sheep and now they're the ones reclaiming their gifts. And so it's really deep, and I think we need to have more spaces like that. So, yeah, my work, those are like my
Mm-hmm.
sessions. And then outside of that, I think even in my personal life, I've noticed just stepping into my gifts and stepping into this service to the community has really changed me fundamentally and transformed me in my own personal relationships. And it's still like the energy that I bring no matter where I am. It's like, well, this is me, like I just think deeply about things. I'm very reflective and I'm very spiritual. So I bring kind of that energy wherever I go. And I've noticed it kind of like shifts people, like even in yoga classes where I'm not technically doing a reading or anything, but I'm still speaking from the heart. And so there's times people are like, hey, you said something in class today that I really needed to hear. I just wanted to tell you
Mm-hmm.
that. So like, it just follows you everywhere.
Yeah, I feel like spirit will always find a way to get the message out. Even in like unexpected
Yeah.
places and with random people that you sometimes don't even like expect. But I feel like we are definitely, I think, channels and vessels and messengers, for that. And girl, we are definitely psychic because you totally brought up a point that I was thinking about in the sense of about being a BIPOC psychic medium and creating these spaces for BIPOC
Mhm.
folks to learn and develop and heal in, right? Because I think when I think about the spiritual field and a lot of what we see in like mainstream media, social media, a lot of people who have really big platforms are white. We do not see a lot of people of color, unfortunately, in these big platform spaces, which is wild to me because we all come from these lineages that a lot of these spiritual practices, and traditions originated from. And I think that it's so important to have more representation and visibility of BIPOC spiritual practitioners and having these spaces and containers, like you said, because I think our experience is very unique in its own way, especially having to work through the wounding of colonialism that we carry within us and that our ancestors also had to carry and live through. So there's like a lot of healing work that goes into this. And I think for a lot of us, coming out of like our spiritual closet was like a huge healing process for not only us, but like our whole lineage, like our whole ancestral line, because we're not just healing ourselves, we're healing everybody that came before us that may not have been able to use their gifts or share them with the world. So I think we have like this special, I guess, responsibility in a way to give back to our communities and uplift our communities and encourage people to really step more into their gifts, more into their own power, into their energy, and to really tap in to what is within them, to what spirit, and God has given them and what their ancestors have given them. So, what has it been like for you in terms of like being a BIPOC, medium, being on social media, being visible to the world, to the people in your life, your communities? How has your experience been like with that?
Well, I'll say there's always two sides of a coin, right? So while it has changed my life, ultimately, I don't know if I would have moved across the country to California if I hadn't stepped onto my path. And I don't know if, like there would have been such a ripple effect in how I've seen this work transform other people's lives as well if I hadn't started this, and have been visible on social media. While that's true, I will also say there's been a lot of heavy things that have happened in terms of being visible. I feel like if you're really genuine and you're authentic about who you are and what you do, you can ultimately like trigger people, and people will be triggered by your light and feel intimidated by you or feel like there's this secret competition. And so I've experienced that as well. And so it is unfortunate because I feel like you are trying to come from this, or I've been trying to come at this from a very sincere place of, hey, this was my journey. I was afraid of my gifts, and now I want to help you to move through that fear and also step into your gifts because, that's what your ancestors are calling you to do. I always feel like the people who meet me through my work, everything is so ancestrally guided. Like, there's, they find me through like the weirdest ways sometimes, and I'm like, wow, that's how you know. It's like we would never would have met unless like that happened and that happened and then that happened and boom, like here we are now in session, and it's very magical, I feel. So visibility, it's such a gift. I feel like your message gets amplified, you get to serve your community. And I've even done readings internationally.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's cool how spirit and ancestors from other countries will still bring the right people together. It doesn't matter where you live, we have the internet. And at the same time, it can also be a little bit triggering for yourself and for other people
Yeah,
too.
I agree. It's so funny that you brought up the whole jealousy like component because I literally was just talking about this with my therapist yesterday, and it's she because she's also very spiritual, and we were talking about that how sometimes our light does trigger other people, and sometimes people are jealous of the connection that we have. But I want to emphasize the point that like just because we do this work or we have these we want to call them titles as a psychic medium or whatever, like it doesn't make us any better than anyone else. It doesn't make us more special than anyone else. Like to me, I've always seen this as like I'm just living out my calling. I'm living out and fulfilling what I know I was made and created and asked to do here in this world and in this lifetime. And I think that people can sometimes feel, maybe threatened or intimidated by the spiritual connection that we have. But like, we're not trying to get one over anyone. We're not trying to be better or, oh, I know more about you than, this person. Like, it's never about that. Like, the true intention of the work is really to help people to heal, help people to deepen their connection with themselves, with the universe, with this, with spirit. And there's just so much like love and like your intention behind it. So I think when we encounter these experiences of like the backlash or the negativity that we get from people, like it can definitely be challenging because like we're really out here just trying to do a good thing. That's all we're really trying to do,
Yeah.
guys.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'd also say like when you are, in your purpose, when you are sharing your light, you move differently than a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people. Like things that might not make sense to other people logically, like you're gonna do because you're intuitive and that's what you were told to do and you're gonna do it. And so I feel like having that self trust and that self confidence to even be doing something like this openly and publicly is, yeah, definitely triggering for some people. But I try to lead, at least in my like social media presence and how I communicate even in readings, to humanize myself because I am still a human at the end of the day. I make mistakes, everybody does. And so I think sometimes when people are coming from like their shadows, they try to tear you down because they're not humanizing you. They're not seeing that, we're not these perfect people who become psychic mediums and do this work. There's no healer on this earth
Right.
that's perfect. So just because you've stepped into your purpose doesn't mean that you stop going to therapy. I also have a therapist. Like, we also need our own community to hold us up and also to keep us in check. Because I think the people who are bypassing that work and are still sharing, I think, like sometimes they might not be sharing what with like pure intention and integrity.
Yeah. And I've actually talked about like spiritual bypassing in one of my previous episodes. And like you said, it's like we, as anyone who works in a healing profession or does any type of like helping work, like we also have to keep doing this work on ourselves. Like it does not stop just because we've discovered and now understand these parts of us. It doesn't mean that like, oh, we're just magically healed now and we have nothing to work on. Like we are equally doing the work just like anybody else. Like we are in therapy, we have mentors and guides and teachers to help us in our own journey as well. So I think that's like you said, so important to understand that like we are humans, like just like everybody else. We're not different in that way. We're not like aliens, have like magical
Yeah,
gifts.
right.
I wanted to ask you too, because, obviously this is called the soul truth. And I talked a lot about how discovering my own soul truth and living out my soul truth, especially in the spiritual sense, has been so life changing and liberating for me. So I'd love to hear from you about how has you living in your soul truth and you living out your purpose changed your life?
Wow, I love that question. I feel like it's changed me as a person. I think in the ways that I didn't accept or understand myself for being different in certain ways in the past, I can now embrace, like, I have more of a capacity to embrace those parts of myself that make me unique and that help me stand out from, other people, and not in like a competitive way, but just embracing your uniqueness. I think before I used to try to fit in, and that was more of my like what was leading me through life. And it just didn't sit right with me because I was like, no, I'm meant to be different. I'm meant to be my own person and to have my own path. Maybe other people don't understand it, but this is my path. And so I feel like when your inner world shifts, then your outer world shifts too. So because I've come into more self acceptance and self love, I think that's why my external reality has shifted so drastically. And, sometimes opportunities find me in the randomest ways in my DMs, like because I'm open and I'm like ready for it. And I feel like I am continuing to do my inner work, even as like someone who's stepped into service. And I feel like that's why these opportunities come, and there's a lot of opportunities to be more visible, to share these messages and to help people on their journeys. I've met amazing people through my work, and I've been able to do markets in like locations I've always wanted to go to. Like San Diego was always like a hot spot that I wanted to be in. So yeah, it just opens your entire world. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. I feel like life is so different now, and I've met and I'm still continuing to like meet and connect with like such amazing souls, and everything just feels more aligned. Like it's not perfect, of
Yeah.
course, like life still has its challenges and there's always going to be things we have to like sift through and work through, but I feel like overall everything within me and within my life and around me just feels so much more in alignment than like it ever did before.
Yeah. And it's one big like cycle of initiations, I think, being on this path. So every time I'm going through that death and rebirth cycle on my own, I always come out like a more evolved and wise version of myself who integrates, the lessons that come up in life. And we never stop growing. So I feel like, someone who's listening to this as freshly as it comes out versus someone who listens to this episode like a year from now, you might not know that next version of me anymore because this is just, like a time capsule of who we are right now. But since we are doing such deep inner work and like service work, we're always changing, we're always growing and like evolving.
Yeah, it doesn't end. It's a
Yeah.
lifelong process and journey. But like you said, it's like there's so many versions of us that we go through in a lifetime. But I think it's amazing to just have the gift of growth and evolution, and that we have the ability and opportunity to redefine ourselves at any time. And I think that's like the coolest thing about this life, right? Is that like we could be one person yesterday and tomorrow we could be a completely different person living a completely different life if we really wanted to. And I think kudos to us for taking
Yeah.
the chance on ourselves and trusting in the spiritual and ancestral calls that we received, and for us to have the courage to step out and do this, because like we said before, like we both had to work through a lot of fear and a lot of obstacles to get here and to get to this place of being like authentically ourselves, and now being able to offer that back into the world. And I just hope and pray that like more people out there will be able to do just that as well, and have the courage and the bravery to really live out their truth, live out their soul truth, and fulfill the purpose and mission that their souls were given here in this world.
Yeah. And I guess just to add to the conversation a bit, I will say that another thing this has taught me is it's okay to change your mind. Like, it's okay to, if you were against something or if something fell off to you before, but through evolving, you start to see, like, okay, maybe I was like closed off to this, but now it actually feels in alignment. So, alignment, I think it's not a fixed word, it's not a fixed like state of being. It allows room for flow and to you just have to keep tuning back into yourself and seeing like, wait, why am I feeling called to this now? I thought like I was totally closed off to that, but now it's like, okay, this feels right, so I'm going to move in that
Yeah,
direction.
I agree, because I think that like in every season of life, there are things that may fit, and be in alignment at that time. But then as we grow and change and life happens, like that shifts with it. So, like you said, it's like things that may have fit within us before, we may have outgrown, or they don't align and match up anymore. So now it's like, okay, just having an openness to seek other things or try other things that could feel more, genuine and authentic and in alignment to you and to your soul or your purpose and goals. So I think that that's something that's, like you said earlier, like that openness, I think is such a key element in all of this, just to be able to be open to trying and also receiving something different than what you may be used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you mentioned a bunch of the amazing services that you offer. And I just want to test, guys, that I highly recommend working with Iris. She's such a beautiful soul and she's absolutely gifted. And her connection, with spirit, with the ancestors is very much real and strong. So, can you just share with our listeners where they can find you and if there's any other services that you offer that you didn't get to mention on today's episode?
Yeah, totally. Also, I want to say right back at you with Pauline's gifts too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to connect, my Instagram is at Laya Kalulua. My website is also layakalulua.com. I offer a free 15-minute connection call if you have any questions about any of the services that I have, or if you just want to do a vibe check and see if you feel aligned before you pay for anything, that's totally fine. I love when other practitioners have that available too. But yeah, I'm going to continue with my workshops. I have a recording of Intro to Mediumship for folks who maybe live farther away or in different country who want to experience it for themselves and get that information at, I would say, a very reduced rate compared to working with someone for a long amount of time. And then I will also continue to teach them at sliding scale prices in person and maybe even add to the series, maybe do one on psychic gifts. Who knows?
Well,
Yeah. So you can find me in all those ways.
awesome. Awesome. And thank you again so much for being here today. I have to say, like, it has been so awesome being able to connect with another like Filipina psychic medium. It's like a dream come true, honestly. Ew, I'm being like emotional because
Oh,
being here on the East Coast and being here in Jersey, like there's not we have such a great Filipino community here, but it's not as big as it is like on the West Coast, like in Cali. And it's been very challenging to find other Filipinos, especially who are in the spiritual work, to connect with and like learn from and grow. So like being able to meet you is like literally an answered prayer. And I'm just so thankful that you were able to be on this episode with me so that we can like join our forces together and share
yes.
this, not only with the Filipino community, but with the whole BIPOC community and just the whole spiritual community as a whole. And I just want to say that, like, I really encourage anyone that feels that nudge from spirit, that feels their intuition brewing, or those gifts are starting to get a little tingly. You're getting those little moments of awakening to really not be afraid and to lean into exploring and learning and developing. And Iris is absolutely someone that can help you to do just that. So, before we wrap up this episode, I just want to know if you have any last words for our listeners today.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to this episode and for being open to hearing us out. I will say if you have any questions on anything that we discussed, including the fear, including the things that maybe you resonate with, I do offer like a contact, like there's a contact tab on my website. So I just want to extend that because I was once in your shoes where I didn't know who to talk to about what I was experiencing. And that's why I'm doing this work now. That's why I try to share things freely or like at a low cost and not just, the full 6 months of coaching and things like that. So just wanted to extend that and say that, you're exactly where you're meant to be if you are experiencing fear, if you are experiencing anxiety. And there's a whole like realm of healers and spiritual workers and therapists and professionals who are here for you. So there's so many ways to get help, so many ways to get support. It just takes that first step of reaching out.
Yes. And you know what's funny? As we wrap this up, I pulled an oracle card this morning, and it was from my spirit animal deck, and the card was about this. It was about the spirit of partnership and connection. And now that we're wrapping up this
Aw.
episode, it's so fitting to what we just talked about and what you just said too about just sharing with the community, because I think that one of the biggest first steps is to make connection, to connect with someone
Mhm.
that can help you to overcome your fear, your anxiety, help you to understand yourself more, understand your gifts, and help you to discover your soul truth, whether that be through this podcast or it's through working with either of us or it's through your therapist or your psychic medium or healer that you see. It is about connection because, like you said earlier in the episode, like we are all interconnected. We are all one with each other, with nature, with the universe. And in being Filipino, I mean, this is what Kapwa is about, So I really encourage everyone just to be open to the gift of partnership, the blessing of connection. And we hope that whoever you find along in your life and soul journey, that you will be able to be blessed with a beautiful gift of connection that will help you to discover more of your own soul truth.
Thank you for listening to The Soul Truth with Pauline Montemayor. I hope this sacred wisdom will continue to guide you along your path. We would love to hear from our listeners, so please show some love by leaving a review and a rating. Stay real, stay you, and stay blessed.